Let's see if we are live. Okay, we are live once again. So this is a preliminary instruction on CLI. If you follow this video along, you see a lot of hardcore information, very deep information on CLI and ALM from Mariano Gomez. But if you hang with me for another maybe 5-10 minutes, we'll look at very preliminary information when it comes to solution management and what you can do to have some sort of a poor man ALM implementation of within Power Platform. So in the last lesson, we looked at solution management, why it's important to use solutions, and then we had a second lesson on solution layering, patching, and cloning. And the use of managed solutions. So what I want to show you is essentially all that we talked about in the previous two lessons, how you could do that using the CLI in the context of solutions. And then following this video, you see Mariano play with taking some of the scripts, his secret sauce scripts for ALM, and then packing and unpacking an app. So that's very cool stuff. So you want to see the whole package, but we're going to start slow here. So the first thing I'd say is, if you don't know what the CLI is about, you can query Power Platform CLI at the Microsoft Docs. I think you're gonna land into the Learn website. Let's go one step back. Microsoft Learn. Yeah, and then it will show you where to download, and then even how to use it in the context of Visual Studio Code. So very simple stuff. Just follow the sequence, you get the CLI. Once you have it, you're gonna open Visual Studio Code, and then the first command that you want to do is pack all. I'm gonna do a clear on mine because I have a lot of authentication profiles in place. So I cleared my authentication profiles, and then I'm gonna do pack auth create, and I think I can do the address of my environment. That is the Dataverse environment / Dynamics 365 / Dynamics CRM, whichever name you want to use. If you have multiple environments, you want to do the URL to make sure that you are authenticating against the one that you need. So we hit enter, you get a pop-up for sign in. So I'm gonna select my creds here. If I didn't have it cached, it would ask for my password. So suppose that the first thing I want to create is a script to export my solution. So what we're going to do is pack solution export, and then you have a few things. You want to do the path in which you want to spit out the solution file. So I think I have a sandbox directory / what is it, ALM, I think. Then the name of my solution, suppose that I want to export this events management solution. So we'll do that. We'll call it events management.zip. Then the name of the solution, that is the internal name of the solution in the environment, is called events management. And then if I want it to be a managed solution, so we're going to do that equals true. All right. I can hit enter, and if I did it correctly, it's going to connect. Oh, it's telling me that there is a file there. I guess I already tried this before. So let's delete that file. There is an option, if I'm not mistaken, to override on sandbox ALM. Let me delete this file from here and
Dash dash
run.
override you can use.
Yeah, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it's connecting, generating my export file. Let's wait for it to finish. while it's loading it, oh yeah, it's done now. So my file is here. Let's just jump back onto the the CLI explanation. So if I go to solutions, you see that the export has a number of other options. So you can do include and then add on some of your configurations that are available in that particular environment as you export. So those options are pretty much the same that you see on the screen should you be exporting the solutions manually on your own. Okay. Now, assuming that we want to import it to another environment, we go back to pack.solution, and then the command is very similar. Now, the catch here is this, though. I am running it authenticated to a particular environment. It would not make sense for me to import this managed solution to the same environment that I just exported out. So again, you would do, once again, pack alt create to that target environment, all right? And then from there, you could do pack solution import and then the path of the file, the one that you just created. Now, the cool thing about this is this though. If you create these profiles and you tag that to like a PowerShell script, you can run this as your poor man's version of CI, okay, or CD for that matter. So take your components, export it, and then import it to another environment. Okay. Now, to Mariano's, you see Mariano's presentation down the line. He's gonna show all commands available within the CLI. There is a lot there. There is one that I use a lot for portals. I can download all files from a portal. I can go ahead and make changes. Let's find a good example here. Web pages. I can go to a page and then make changes to that page and then just run another command to upload my changes to the environment. Okay.
I told you,
So
Ozzy was the expert in pages.
so you can do a lot with the CLI, but what I would like you to do, if you have time, experiment the authentication, experiment the solution export, the solution import on a target environment, and kind of wrap your head around these particular options on the command line. You know, name, whether it's managed, whether you want it to override. Because as we look at Azure DevOps pipelines, you see a lot of the same properties or attributes, if you will, or options to these commands showing up in Azure DevOps pipeline configuration. So try to get your head around these commands, explore the CLI. If you do a lot of Canvas app, use the Canvas app commands within the CLI to see what's available. And then when we move into pipelines, a lot of the configuration and even a lot of the error messages will make more sense to you as you explore. Again, that would be your homework. Try to get one solution exported using this poor man's version of ALM, and then try to understand the concepts before we go any deeper. Following this talk, you see Mariano presenting a bit more on the CLI, a little more in-depth explanations on these commands, and then the following lessons we're gonna look at Azure DevOps pipeline. So I'm gonna pass the baton to Mariano. Stay on this video, you see more shortly.
Okay, guys, let's see what we got here. I had a small slide deck, nothing too crazy. Victor will tell you I'm not a slide guy, so we just want to make this fun and useful to everybody. So let me start with what is Power Platform CLI or command, or CLI, like most people would refer to it. Just keep in mind that this is a command line interface program. So if you are a DOS fan or if you are a PowerShell fan, this is how you would access this command line interface program. And it does allow you to perform the way I catalog it, so it's very understandable, is two sets of tasks or two sets of operations. It allows you to do administrative tasks, and those administrative tasks are performed on environments. So basically, it has three major functions there. It has the admin, the authentication, and the telemetry. If you're worried about controlling and administering your environment, those three sections, those three options are pretty much within the domain of what the client does, or the command line interface does. But it also allows you to work with development resources. So from development resources, you guys have attended. I can see some of you from last sessions. You've attended. So it's solutions. If you're working with solutions, you can work with the CLI option. If you're working with Canvas apps, PCF controls, custom connectors, Power Pages, formerly Power Apps portals, and Dataverse plugins. So those are the domains, the admin and the development aspect of Power Platform. Well, you're looking at this now and you're saying, well, Mariano, I think we can do all that stuff from the actual admin environment or the Power Platform Admin Center, and certainly from Power App Studio. The truth is, yes, you can do it from there. A lot of this is meant to abstract a lot of the things that you can do from the web interface, but keep in mind that this is precisely some of the things that we want to talk about here today. So just to make it, let me go back up because I think I went too fast. Nope. Okay. All right, there you go. So probably Victor already touched on this, but the idea is, where do you get it? So let me open Visual Studio Code here. And this will actually drive into the next topic once I get to it. So this is Visual Studio Code, right? And Visual Studio Code is, for all intents and purposes, a very open source development environment, and even for managing text or XML, or even complex SQL Server development, any type of development that you want to carry out, and there's an extension for. That's what Visual Studio Code allows you to do. So now you're in your mind, you're like, I would never work with Visual Studio Code. Well, that's precisely something that we're going to talk about in a second, but keep in mind that Power Platform or the Power Platform tools, also formerly known as Power Platform Command Line Interface, live inside of Visual Studio Tools. So you will get it from the Visual Studio Code extension marketplace. And basically, all you gotta look for is Power Platform Tools. That's the little guy here that I'm highlighting. And once you download it, install it, boom, it's within the context of Visual Studio Code. So how would you access it? So let's go back here and type CLS. The idea here is you would go to terminal, and you would actually create a new terminal, okay? And that new terminal is, in essence, the context to access the command line. And I think Victor was already in his way to telling you guys about commands. So that's basically your PAC command. And PAC stands for Power Apps Client or Command Line Interface. But keep in mind that that's been renamed several times, and now it's called the Microsoft Power Platform Command Line Interface. But again, once renamed, it's now called the Power Platform Tools. So all in all, we're talking about the same thing. If you say Power Platform Tools, Power Apps Command Line Interface, Power Platform CLI, if you tell me any of those things, we're all talking about the same thing, okay? So I want to stop here for 1 second and just ask if you have any questions about this. And please feel free to come off of mute. This is your session, not mine. Yep, Kamal, Kunal, I see you have your hands up.
Hi. I just want to ask that is there a provision to install the Power Platform tools as an extension in Visual Studio on premises itself rather than on Visual Studio Code?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not sure I understand fully what you're asking.
I mean to say that is there a provision to install Power Platform tools as an extension on Visual Studio rather than on Visual
Oh,
Studio Code?
yes, yeah. So, no, not for Visual Studio. Um, Interestingly enough, a lot of what Microsoft is producing, especially what I've noticed, is anything open source is pretty much geared towards Visual Studio Code or GitHub. When it's not open source, is obviously obtainable through other methods. But I think there's a nuance to your question. There are things that you can do in Azure DevOps or Visual Studio that are Power Platform related, and we'll see some of that in a bit. So hold that thought for me, and we'll get to some of maybe we can contrast what you're asking with some of the functionality that's available in Azure DevOps, for example. Okay, so please hold that
Okay.
thought for me.
Thank you.
Right. So here is where you would, in essence, start to work your way through the uh, Power Apps CLI or Power Platform CLI. Okay. Now, to initiate again, once again, your option here is to type pack at the command line, and that basically gives you access to all the options or all the features within pack. And I'll talk about some of that in a second. Okay. So who is it for? Right? Because it's also important to understand who this thing was targeting. It's targeted to professional development developers and environment administrators. So if you are your regular end user citizen developer, this and for you. And the reason why is because I don't know too many people nowadays that are, that dabble in DOS anymore, um, or PowerShell, unless there are developers. And certainly most of us are actually used to working certainly with the studio components and certainly the Power Platform Admin Center from the web interface. So if you are not one to memorize command line interface and parameters and what's not, and you're more used to a graphical environment, then this is not for you. If you are the typical administrator like Victor and I, who love to write command line interfaces, then this is for you. If you're a typical developer and you actually have probably an ALM methodology in place that you are actually working with right now, then this is probably something you can take advantage of. And even so, I will tell you that some of the tools that you find for the professional developers that are available in Power Platform CLI can be also automated and extended from Azure DevOps or GitHub accordingly. So, but the command line interface was designed mainly for your typical professional developer or your environment administrator that is used to these type of operations. Okay. All right. So we saw that. Actually, let me bring this up again for a second. I have this page that I have abstracted from all this stuff, right? Because even I don't know every single thing that is embedded in the pack command. Frankly, I don't, and I am not interested in learning everything by heart either. So what I've done is I've abstracted some of this, and this is a list that I carry out with me all the time whenever I'm trying to do these type of classes, so everybody can see what's in it. Okay, so we talked about the admin features. So you can list, create, backup, delete, reset, list backups, restore, copy status, check the status of, assign users to, and list app templates across environments. That's what this is for. The administrative features are for your environment. Now, keep in mind that a lot of this stuff, as I said before, you can do in the admin center directly from the web interface. Okay. So can you create an environment from the admin center? Absolutely. Can you delete an environment from the admin center? Absolutely. Can you back up something from an environment from an admin center? Perfectly fine. You check the status of so that's how you should equate this, right? So pretty much that will give you an idea that the same things that you can do from the actual web interface are the same things you can do from the command line interface as well. Application, you can list and install applications. So we already know that's something that you can do. Authentication, right? So here we're talking about OAuth. OAuth 4.0, I think, is the authentication mechanism here. So you can create, list, select, delete, update, name, and clear credentials that are going to authenticate against your Power Platform environment from the command line interface. Okay. So I'll give you one example of that. And if I'm going too fast, you know, I've been running like crazy between meetings today, so bear with me. Okay, so if you take a look at this here, at the Power Platform, and please tell me if you can see this. If it's too small, I'll try to increase the font. Okay, so if I type in pack auth, which is the authentication one, it will give me, of course, a list of the things that I can do here. So it'll first tell you that you're missing a subcommand, and the next thing will be what is it that you want to do. So I basically want to go back and create, and if I keep hitting enter, it will tell me you're missing, you know, you're missing things that you might want to do. So anyways, here in create, I now get the option to select my account that I actually want to log in with against the my Power Platform environment. So this is what I'm going to select. It validates the connection, and it's created a universal connection against my org. Okay, so you can see here org 48A48, that's here in the dynamics.com. I'm authenticated as Mariano at Mekoma.com, and this is a public connection. It's public because I'm on this machine. I'm not concerned about that, right? So you will use OAuth. Keep in mind that basic authentication has been deprecated and it's being pretty much removed from every single Microsoft service out there. So that's kind of how you would authenticate against the environment. If you don't authenticate against the environment, no other command is going to work. Okay, so just know that you cannot do any admin work. You cannot work with any solutions, anything, unless you authenticate against the environment and your credentials are cleared. Okay. There's also, so if I do, now if I do something like pack, auth, and list, it should list now all the credentials that I have. So right now, you can see this is my universal credential. It's actually telling me the friendly name. It's telling me the URL for that org that I'm authenticated against or was not. And it's telling me right now, here's my user and was not. Now, if you want to remove that credential, obviously you will use pack auth delete. And then there's this subcommand called index, or this parameter called index. And then I can say, use this index number 1. And that's how I would remove that credential from there. So now it tells me I have no profiles available. So once again, if I go to pack auth list, you'll see that I have nothing, no profiles right now selected. Okay, so that's one quick example on how you would authenticate. You can list and you can delete or remove credentials from the org. One that I actually wanted to show you guys is you can do pack auth create, and I believe create also has a parameter called is it name? Let me double check. I think it was deprecated, so you don't even need that anymore. All you got to do is select what you want, and then you're good to go again. Okay. All right. So that was that, showing you how that works. and that's on the outside. Then with wave 1 of 2021, they introduced the Canvas feature, or the Canvas set of commands to deal with Canvas applications. So in Canvas, you can actually pack, unpack, and create Canvas applications from your Power Apps command line interface or your Power Platform CLI interface. I'll show you some other things that you can do here, but give me 1 second. So I'll talk about this in a bit. We'll focus on that in 1 second. Now, you also have the ability to work with connectors, as I said before. You can list, initialize, create, download, and update. And this is specifically for custom connectors. This has nothing to do with the existing 600 plus connectors that are out there. These are more if you're working with custom connectors. You can download those into your development projects and continue to work on them. Then when you finish, you can push them back into the platform. What were you saying, Victor? For what? For $50? You wanna unmute?
Now somebody was asking if they could have this table.
Oh, okay.
Later.
Yeah, absolutely. You can get this table. And probably one of the things I was planning to do is also hyperlink every single one of the commands and move it to another page where it shows me the sub commands. But you know, that's the work that I haven't done. Then there's the data, the data operations that you can do. So you can export data and import data. Where? In Dataverse. Okay. So you also have commands that deal with importing and exporting data to Dataverse. The best friend that you will have is the help. So if you actually go back here, for one reason you don't know something about something, you can just type pack help, and it will give you a list of options. If I want to know more about Canvas, pack help Canvas, I can type Canvas, and then it will give me information about the Canvas options. Okay, so that's kind of what you get here. All right, I probably misspelled something, but that's the whole idea. All right, then you can deal with things at the org level, the list of orgs that are created, and the select to basically choose your default organization. Okay, package basically allow you to initialize, add external package, add solutions, add reference, deploy, and show anything package related from a solution. Okay, Victor is a specialist in this one particular one because I know he's like the god of Power Portals, so or Power Pages now. So he can give you more information about the list option and what you can do with the Power Apps portal options. But in essence, you can list all your sites. You can download and upload anything that that you've actually done on your machine. Now, this is important to keep in mind. Why do these things most have a download and an upload, or a download and an update, or a create and an update? That's because it's targeted, once again, for professional developers working under Visual Studio Code who want to stay away from all the online stuff and working directly in a web environment. Okay, so think of this as your gateway to doing professional development, where you have teams of developers working on features and different aspects of applications and portals from within a development environment itself. Okay, and that is also confirmed by PCF. PCF was probably the first set of targeted command line interface capabilities. And this was done for the developers that are building controls for Power Apps and the Power Apps environment in general. Okay. So now you have the capabilities to also initialize and push plugins into Dataverse. I have not even tried to work with any of that stuff, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know exactly what it does, because I've never created a plugin for Dataverse. but know that that's possible for those of you who are trying to figure out how you do that stuff. Okay. Solutions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Victor, but solutions was added fairly recently as well, right? I think that was added with wave 2 of 2020. And basically, this is when we got all the capabilities to handle, to create, list, delete, right? Import, export, clone, publish, upgrade, add licenses to, and everything related to solutions, pack, unpack a solution,
Yeah.
and all these kind of things. Okay. So again, the same thing you can do with the solutions page. You can do pretty much from the CLI as well. And then you have all the telemetry stuff, which I'm not going to get into right now. Okay, so let's see what we have after this. All right, that was pretty much what I had for as far as the command line interface goes. So I wanted to actually show you a few things. Okay, so let me bring up my browser, and hopefully this will all work. If it doesn't work, keep in mind that this is just a demo. So we got to preface it with that. Let me try and load this a few times. There you go. So here I have my, for those of you who are familiar with this, this is Azure DevOps. This is what professional developers use to store, admin, and deploy their source code into different environments and you know, to host different type of projects. So I can host anything here from a SQL Server development project to a complete .NET project to a web development project to a Power Platform project. So my Zero to Hero project currently hosts the repository for an expense application that I've been working on. Now, you guys are going to say, well, Mariano, you know, how did you get that thing in there? Let's talk about that. This is not a course on Azure DevOps or pipelines or anything like that. So I'm just going to mention that at a very high level. And if you guys, I think there are sessions where that you can attend later on throughout the week or the next couple of weeks where other very super smart people can explain this to you in detail. Okay, but that's not the focus of this this particular one. But at least at a general level, I'm going to explain to you what this means. Okay, so when you're developing Power Platform solutions in general, right? You start from a solution. Victor told you that last week. Okay, and that solution hosts all your components, whether that's applications, reports written in Power BI, whether it's you know, workflows, everything that you can think of that you can do in Power Platform should, and I actually I'm going to change the word should for must be in a solution, a custom solution. You must be using solutions for everything you develop going forward. If nothing else you take from this session that we're talking here about today, that should be the message. Okay, so I created this expense application. It's hosted in a solution, and the solution is the base for how I got all this code into the repository. So how did you get the code into the repository? Well, I use a pipeline. So this is my source code pipeline that I created, and that source code pipeline has some YAML code that basically tells Power Platform to transport the code over. So I think who was the person? Kamal, is that you? I think you will raise your hand this now. Or Kunal, I'm sorry, earlier today in this conversation. Well, it also happens that there are a set of components that you can install in Azure DevOps that also do some of the same things that you can do from the command line interface. But these are specifically targeted for development. Okay, so it means that you can create solutions, you can export those solutions, you can move the source code around from a solution into a repository where you can preserve that code. You can do version control. You can do all those things that us professional developers like to do, right? to maintain the integrity of our code, being able to roll back to other versions, etc. But more importantly, we can do what we call in professional development continuous CI/CD, continuous. My mind is foggy today, but anyways, continuous deployment of code. Okay, where we actually are creating our projects. We're working. Thank you. Continuous integration. I appreciate it. Continuous integration, continuous deployment of our code. Where we're actually taking things from an agile perspective, doing our sprints and deploying code as soon as it's tested and moved to production. Okay, so we're doing that in very measurable sprints and in very measurable steps and very measurable goals to get things out into production. So as a result, there are commands in Azure DevOps that you can install from the marketplace as well, or a complete library that you can install from the marketplace, where you get some of the same capabilities that you have in the Power Platform command line interface. Okay, so here we can deal with solutions, we can export, we can import, etc. And in particular, we are able to get our source code from the environment into Azure DevOps, where we will store those in repositories. So that repository has my Canvas app, and here are the components for that Canvas app, and here are other components from it. Okay, are we clear up to that point? How that happens, not the subject of this session that we have today, but we can talk about it in more detail at some point. All right. So once we have our repository, typically what we tend to do is we tend to clone this repository. Let me go back here. We tend to clone our repository locally on our machines. That's the thought process that us professional developers go through, right? And then at the end of the day, what we can do is we can generate a project to work at the command line level. As you can see here, it basically tells you what do you want to do with this. So I want to actually clone this in Visual Studio Code, which is super cool, right? So I can go ahead and clone this. I can then select a folder where I want to do this. Okay. So for now, I'm going to go to my documents folder locally, and I'm going to create a folder called 0 to Hero. All right. And this is where I'm going to clone my project. Okay. So I'm going to select this as my repository location. Fido, open, connect, reset, connect. Okay. Let me see if we can get this to work. I knew at some point I shouldn't have actually resetted this. Let me see, generate good credentials. Okay, and then clone. Let's see if that works. Okay, let me see here. Interesting. I will try to increase the font size. Give me 1 second. Is that better? Okay. So all in all, the bottom line is once you clone your repository, you will get a folder with the same code downloaded into that repository, into that local. Keep in mind that local copy. And let me see if I have something here that we can use. Let me see if we have something here that we can use. Documents. Let me see if we have something here that we can use. Probably don't have anything right now that I can use, but I will try to walk through the explanation of this. So once you get your expense application folder down to your machine, right, you can then basically use the Canvas option to, or Visual Studio Code to work through your Canvas application. And basically, if you look at this expense application, uh, there is an MS app. That MS app is exactly what you would use the unpack command for in Canvas to create the actual representation of the actual, get the actual JSON files for that for that app, and then you can start using Visual Studio Code to make changes to the app from Visual Studio Code, not necessarily inside of the environment. Now, there was one image that I saw the other day that is intending to replace a lot of this work that we do here in Azure DevOps directly with strictly and I think this was an announcement at the recent Power Platform conference, where you can actually from Power Apps Studio, you can connect your app directly into a repository, okay, in Azure DevOps. And what it does then is it pushes all the code of your app out there, and you don't have to worry anymore about uncompressing or unpacking this MS app into the different JSON files to start working on it from Visual Studio Code. I think that's pretty cool. It's a time saver, etc. But don't forget that then once you're done working with your app, you have to repack it, right? And then put it back as part of the solution called expense app that I have here, and move that into your into your production solution or your QA solution. Couple things to keep in mind. If you think about the process that you follow today to move, for those of you who don't use any professional or any ALM operations that are resemblant to what I'm talking about here. Right now, you would have to develop, or you, what I think happens today is for most people who don't have an ALM implementation is they actually implement something in one environment, right? Hopefully they're using solutions. Once they're done, they export that solution, right? Then they import it back into their QA environment. QA says, yep, it's good to go. So you download that solution again, right? And this time you download it as an unmanaged or a managed solution, and then now you push it back into production as as a managed solution. Hopefully that's what's happening, right? But anything that goes from that environment that you have that you're developing in, before you release it into production, that is actually unmanaged code. And this is why you get this MS app. If I were to go to the Power App Studio directly, right? So if I were to go to Power App Studio, let's see if I can get over here. This same app that okay, now I know how I'm going to do this. This same app that I'm getting from, let's say, this particular app, right? Let's say I open this app. These things take a little longer over when you're sharing your screen for some reason. So bear with me here for a second. So all I wanted to do is I wanted to go to File here and do a Save As, and then take this to a computer file. And then hit download here. Okay, that's great. Now I have that MS app. So that MS app is exactly the same thing that I wanted to show you that is in your in your repository in DevOps. Okay, so by definition now, what I can do is I can go to Visual Studio, and I can say something like, let me just go back here, CLS, and see what directory we're in. I think it was in downloads, right? There we go. There. Yeah, sorry. There we go. So this is my MS app. So what I could do is I could run a pack canvas unpack, and then I can see what the parameters are for that, right? So here's my sources. In this case, that would be the McCormick Power Approvals, that MS app, and then the path where I want it, right? So let's do something like create, we're gonna make a directory here. So here on the downloads, I'm gonna go and create a folder called MS app source, right? So here we can do something like pack canvas unpack, and then we can do something like sources, and then we're gonna call that McCormick Power Approvals dot MS app, and then the folder would be I'm sorry, this would be the directory. So that's MS app there. I think that's what I call the folder. MS app source, I'm sorry. And then I can say the MS app file would be the one that's in my folder. So this was McCormick Power Approvals dot MS app. And if this works, then it should decompress it into that particular folder. What does it say? Parse failed, power approvals. It might need double quotes here. Okay, there you go. So if I go now to this MS source, now you can see all my assets here. I have my assets, my connections, my data sources, anything that's entropy, but particularly I have my source folder, right? And in my source folder, I have all my FX files. So that's my formulas. I have all my components, my edit state, everything. So this is pretty much what we will do. And now here, if I just drag this here, right? Oh, not here. That would be here. If I just open a folder and I take that MS app folder, this will then now bring all the components that are a part of that app into this particular screen here. So I can go to approve screen.fx, and now I can see all my code as it was meant to be at a professional development level. If I know what I'm doing, which typically when it comes to PowerFX, I do, I can actually edit this code right here and then. Now, the one thing I will tell you guys, if you try this, there's no syntax checking, there's no there's no compiler checking anything. So you pretty much do this at your own risk. Okay. Now, I think in the near future, we will see capabilities that will from within the Power Platform CLI that will allow us to validate, or even from within Visual Studio that would allow us, or Visual Studio Code, I should say, that would allow us to validate Power Effects formulas, okay, right within the application. So right from within the Visual Studio interface, Visual Studio Code interface. That is important to keep in mind, because at some point when that comes to light, then most professional developers will probably stay away more from the web interface than they would, and probably will have more capabilities built into this that allows them to build applications with the tools and the capabilities that they already know. Okay. So anyways, when I'm done with this, what I would do then is I would probably go back to the command line interface, right? So you would go to your terminal window, which is over here. And then you can then go back and unpack all this stuff or pack all this stuff. So you do something like pack, canvas, pack. And then if you don't know the statements for that, there you go. You can always check. You need a source, where the sources are, and the app that you're going to repack it to. So I'm going to do something like pack sources. And then I'm going to select, that would be that folder that we have. So that will be the MS app source, right? And then we can select the MS app that we want to pack it in. And I'm going to say this is Power Approvals V2. Okay. So that basically repacks it. If I go now and I take a look at this, this is my MS app. This is an MS app application. Right. Let's just put the right extension to it. I forgot to add that to the list. But here's my MS app application now. And what I can do is I can take this with another pipeline and publish that into move it in. First of all, check it back into my repository and then publish it back to put to production or QA. And for that, we also use pipelines. So here's a pipeline that I've created that will move that code over to QA from the repository that we just saw this now. So you go here, edit this, and then you can see that basically it downloads the tools, the Power Platform tools, the same tools that you know and that we've been talking about. It basically packs the solution, imports the solution, export it back so we can move it to the artifact directory. And I know this might sound like esoteric to a lot of you, but keep in mind that this is within the context of a professional development environment. And that's how we typically use the Power Apps or the Power Platform command line interface from a professional developer standpoint. This is all I wanted to communicate to you. It's a lot to take in. You know, if you are your typical end user, this probably is something that you would not ever get into. But if you have an ALM methodology that you're trying to implement in your organization, you will find that the Power Apps command line interface or the Power Platform command line interface combined with some sort of environment for DevOps, whether that's GitHub, whether that's Azure DevOps, should help you in implementing a more robust strategy around application development, around any Power Platform resource development going forward. That's all I had to show in 45 minutes. I apologize for being late. I don't control sometimes my schedule the way I would like to, but hopefully you take the gist out of this and run, go, talk